Hello, everyone. I'm talking about Assassin's Creed 2. Oh man, this is this is a really good game. This is man, it's such an interesting, weird, and cool setting and franchise. And I think with Assassin's Creed, we got a taste of this weird world, but Assassin's Creed 2 gave us a full blast of more of the same. I think what's really, really neat and interesting is that, we started in medieval, Holy Land, and the sequel for this game. Oh, what's it going to be? Maybe, still in the Holy Land, but, during the, the high Middle Ages, or maybe somewhere further back in the past. And instead we went to the Italian Renaissance, which I just thought, oh, this is cool. This is really, really something. And so it's interesting because we are still playing as Desmond. So in the main story, Desmond has escaped from Abstergo and joined this rebel group. And, they kind of threw out the whole sort of end of the last game. I mean, it's really cool how the last game ended on this cryptic, weird image in Desmond's room. As he got Eagle Vision in real life, he got this really cool thing happen where he could see the symbols, and it's okay, he's awakening to his power or something. And they escape from Abstergo and they make their own Animus, the 2.0, and now they're going back in time in order to find out again the location of the pieces of Eden, which will control people. I find it interesting that essentially we're still playing as the same character, implying that Desmond's ancestors are Altair and Ezio. And they end up in the same essential timeline. So it's interesting how, and again, the sort of relationships in Assassin's Creed are never really heavily implied. For example, in this game, it's, I believe in Venice, you meet Rosa, who is kind of this mischievous gypsy that's kind of implied that is, Ezio's love interest. And then in the first game, you had the Templar Knight, who was a woman, and you kind of spare her life. And I think pretty much from that it's implied that that was Altair's, relationship there. I just find it interesting how, they're not super heavily, canon and dogmatic on what that relationship looks like, but it's just briefly implied, and it's almost enough for that to take place. So what is interesting about this game is that it's a lot more in-depth. There's a lot more usage of story and narrative, and an emphasis on telling Ezio's story and really making him a interesting character, a variation on Desmond, but still his own character. And I just think that's such an interesting thing to do. So the game will take place very similar to the first game. You have 4 different areas, but now they are Florence, Venice, Tuscany. I actually forget the other 2, but essentially it's the same thing. You have an optional overworld now where you can ride a horse and go around from place to place. Or wait, no, I think they removed the overworld. Yeah, so the kingdom, the whole getting to and from places, that's actually gone in this game, and now you just fast travel between gates. You can still get a horse though and ride it around in the countryside, but yeah. So Ezio's story, this is kind of interesting, where Ezio, will go on to become the more iconic character of this franchise, despite Altair, because Assassin's Creed 2 does so well that they end up having a pseudo-sequel, which is Brotherhood, and then a kind of another pseudo-sequel, which is Revelations. And you kind of see the prevalation of these Assassin's Creed spin-off games where they kind of introduce a new little mechanic, or a major-ish mechanic, and then frame the whole game around that. And I don't think I'm going to be talking about Revelations or Brotherhood later, so I might as well do it in this video, but in Revelations, or rather in Brotherhood, it was that you had a Brotherhood of Assassins. You could hire assassins, send them on missions. It was this kind of staff management simulator kind of thing. You said the percentage of success. You could dress your assassins and give them different weapons and training and recruit them right off the street and create your own Brotherhood, which was really cool. And then you had Revelations, which was old Ezio, and maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later. there was no real main mechanic for Revelations. It was just kind of the end for Ezio's story. So Ezio Auditore di Firenze is a nobleman of Italian Renaissance era, and essentially his family is essentially executed by false accusation by politicians. I forget the exact reason why, but this kind of accusation turns Ezio to kind of a life of crime. And so it's interesting that in the first like few hours, you actually don't even have the assassin's outfit at all. You are just a regular kind of guy, and it really, again, focuses on Ezio as a character. One thing that really shocked me about this game is how they introduced mechanics into gameplay. For example, they do this crazy thing where in the opening of the game, you actually show Ezio being birthed. And when he is birthed, he is, a little, gooey baby, and you get the mechanics of the game right then and there. So they say, press Y to, move the head area so the baby cries, press X and B to, move the baby's arms, and then you press A to move the baby's legs. And that's the same concept for, this game, that these 4 buttons control the framework of the human body. This is also when they started introducing mainly historical figures. I forgot that was actually a thing, but now it's a thing they always do in Assassin's Creed games. But they kind of choose, okay, who's going to be, the Templar faction, who's going to be the assassin faction, And so throughout this game, you'll meet characters like Leonardo da Vinci, Niccolo Machiavelli. I think Niccolo might be in Brotherhood. I'm not sure if he's also in this one. Cesare Borgia, who of course is the main kind of antagonist, are the Borgia Pope and the Borgia family. There are also, of course, the Medicis. So yeah, there are quite a few, and of course the painters, of course. I forget which ones, but yes. Again, you get to climb beautiful architecture and climb tall steeples and church buildings and different famous monuments and castles. That's all back. You also fight, the Templars and their legions and the guards. It's interesting, though, that one thing I liked about the first game is that you would have these hidden Templars, these big guys in armor who would stand out in like the town or the countryside, and they would just be random targets. I actually missed that mechanic. I missed the fact that you'd have a VIP target just in the world as almost a collectible kind of thing. And instead, that has been replaced now with treasure chests. So now, again, the sound design for when you open a treasure chest, and in general, a lot of the things in this game are very, very cool. They'll have this weird gleam sheen effect on it to signify that it is, acquirable, essentially. And so there will be things like, you have currency in the game. So you now have Italian florins to use to buy certain upgrades, different weapons, and different types of upgrades for your villa. As you will later get, you can upgrade your villa in the countryside with different, decorations and equipment and whatnot. Something else you can do with your money is you can actually throw it in the streets. Again, a fun mechanic where you can make a little mob where if you throw the money, the people will end up fighting for it and get in the way of the guards, which is always very funny. They have new things now to distract the guards. You can now use, courtesans essentially to distract guards, as was shown in the trailer. I remember when the initial trailer for Assassin's Creed 2 was being revealed, I thought, oh, this is a weird kind of looking, Italian carnival game or something, some kind of historical thing. And it wasn't until I saw the hood that I was like, oh my god. I immediately just went totally crazy. Another thing I just realized also isn't in this game is the fact I always thought it was really cool that Altair could just, blend by praying, and that was always like a kind of a getaway or get out of jail free card. If a guard became very suspicious of you right in front of you, or you like moved quickly, you could always blend by praying, and that would kind of always get you out of trouble. Something I also something in both games actually that I always found incredibly frustrating and also very funny are the crazy beggars in the streets, because of course they did not have asylums back in these days. You have these people who live in the streets, and their only job is to attack random passerbys and push them. And if you're trying to blend in and he comes and pushes you out of cover and he alerts the guards, then that's your problem. And I find it incredibly frustrating, but also incredibly funny. And I always beat the crap out of those guys. But one thing I do miss is that now instead of praying, you actually steal from people's pockets, which is interesting, I suppose. You can also now loot guards once they have been defeated and get different kinds of items. This is the first game that introduced more robust weapon wheels, so you now have a lot of sub-items that assist you in your execution of stealth and other things. Things like smoke bombs, arrows, of course you still have your knives, now you have poison and other things, and you bring them up in a wheel and select them that way, as I think most people are aware. But when I think about the weapon wheel, the first time I can remember it was being Assassin's Creed 2 is the first time I remember seeing it. Also, an issue I guess that comes into this game is when you're in a safe zone and when you're not can also be very frustrating. There are these special areas where guards will be guarding, the one building that actually you can enter into, usually something good inside of it. And when that is a possibility, there's going to be a little red marker on the thing. So even if you're in that area, you essentially will get alerted if the guards see you, and they'll automatically attack you. And so sometimes it's a bit ambiguous exactly where, where exactly you have to be. Also, this game introduces basic economics. I mentioned the villa. So the villa is your kind of home base that you use throughout the series of the game. It's from your Uncle Mario, who does introduce himself. It's a me, Mario, which I thought was a very funny, stupid thing to do, but they did it anyway. And in any case, your villa is where your home base is. It is where you store all of your armor and weapons. This game also introduces things that you can buy different dyed colors for Ezio's outfit, which is pretty cool. Another thing, too, is now that Ezio will be able... the big thing, of course, they showed in the trailer is that Ezio now has 2 hidden blades. Oh, Assassin's Creed 2, wow. And so you now can, eventually, at some point in the game, you can assassinate 2 people at once, which is a lot of fun, very cool. As I said, you could get different weapons in this game, so it includes things like swords, falchions, to things like warhammers, maces, and axes. Another cool thing is you can also pick up different enemies' weapons and use that against them. And so there are just a lot of upgradable cool weapons and items you can get in this game. Also, the music, I have to praise the music for a moment, because the music in these places, especially Venice, is just mesmerizing. It is absolutely some of the most beautiful music I've heard for a game. And it really sets the mood and the energy for the whole thing. It's it's this mystical, scenic kind of area, and Ezio is kind of wrapped up in this, again, this massive conspiracy. He ends up trying to just assassinate the killer of his father, but ends up getting wound up in something much more important, epic, and Again, the music, especially in this game, has become iconic of the entire series. Something else they introduced in this game is you can pay off the town criers to lower your situational awareness. So now you have an additional meter on the left-hand side where, if it's full, usually after you've assassinated a target, even if a guard sees you, their suspicion will go almost up to red, and if you do anything crazy, they will automatically attack you. So there are certain ways to drop that throughout the game. One is paying people off. Another one is ripping down wanted posters and all this other kind of fun stuff. Of course, synchronization is back. Diving into bales of flowers now is back. Something else that they really started doing a lot more with this game is also adding Animus database things. So to give you dates and times and names of places and like mini history lessons, which I think is just absolutely lovely. Another cool thing is that you'll be looking or more so climbing an ancient piece of architecture, and in doing so you will basically get a little pop-up telling you about the history of that place, and it's almost like a virtual tour, but you're getting a tour of medieval Italy through a simulation, which is very cool and funny. Another new thing they introduced in this game is little, for lack of dungeons or temples. There'll be sections where you find some underground passageway, and basically it'll be only platforming with some combat in between. There are also now races, which are a lot of fun. Again, we don't have the chase theme from the original game, but now we have the one for the Rooftops of Venice, which is an excellent theme and great for running around and exploring the environment. And probably my favorite thing that honestly was only in this game and did not come back in any other game was the Illuminati puzzles, for lack of a better word. Essentially, you would have these puzzles where you would have to, take a famous painting, and you would have to reorganize it as a puzzle, or like analyze, some of the items in it, looking for a piece of Eden. And it was this really cool concept that in every major painting, things like the Mace of a King or that little globe thing with the cross on it, that those actually were pieces of Eden. And the whole conspiracy is that all of these things essentially were mind control devices or alien technology or whatever they are. They keep it pretty, ambiguous. In terms of gameplay, again, it's pretty much the same. You can now, do the same thing, but just with more and different weapons. Counters were kind of the same. I think it's in Brotherhood they introduced the kind of flash kill mechanic, where essentially once you get one kill, you can kill just the next enemy as a kill streak thing. And that's something that I mean, it's fun, I suppose, but it really made it not kind of work in the future games, because then it's just like, well, I'm just killing guys now, and it's just like almost a slog. And it's like, all right, well, it is what it is. Not sure if they built, the amount of enemies around that concept, or they built that around the fact they had two enemies to deal with in the environment. Again, the story goes places around, conspiracies and ancient societies. Even your partners, Lucy, Rebecca, and the guy, I forget what his name is. They also have pretty good dialogue in the game. Sometimes you'll meet a historical figure or see a historical building, and they'll kind of give you a little kind of modern take on it, which it was always very funny, and I always really appreciated. The chemistry between the characters is actually pretty good in this game, even though most of them are just voices most of the time. But of course, it has the age-old method where the Templars are the bad guys and the Assassins are the good guys. I need to uncover the mystery. This is such a very cool concept where it took enough from real life and then enough from, I would say, almost, conspiracy fantasy, and mix it into a really fun, interesting experience. I can't imagine anything quite like this, or quite, being like this in the future. I mean, the closest thing is almost 12 Monkeys, but that movie's kind of more schizophrenic and depressing about this virus rather than a historical event. So this whole concept is incredibly interesting. Something I should have mentioned, the one thing that has changed in terms of gameplay and combat is you now have stronger big enemies, and these guys are usually the fat ones who carry around the big axes and lances and stuff, and you have to take them on. And by the time you get to Venice, there's a lot of very powerful enemies, difficult enemies, especially the ones with the pole arms. But anyway, as the story goes on, it's a lot different from the structure of the previous game, where you were just very simply doing, mission after mission. There's a lot more story focus, and everything feels much more free form. So it's not just like 10 assassinations. It's, this character and then this character and this battle and that battle. And it's a lot better constructed, I would say. On that, I'll talk a little bit about Brotherhood and the other ones now, I suppose. So Brotherhood, again, I well, actually, even before I get to Brotherhood, this is also, I think, the first Assassin's Creed to feature DLC. I don't think the first one had any, but this one does. It's essentially you had. It was interesting. You had corrupted chapters 13 and 12, I believe, and so they actually have this in the game where you just have these missing things where they're like the lore is like, oh, they're corrupted, and if you get the DLC, they're magically uncorrupted. And I found that was a little bit cheap, I guess, the fact that you're going to have this stain if you just don't get the DLC and have these hidden things. And what they are, they're around Santa Rosa, who led a religious revolt in Florence in the Middle Ages around book burning and or something. I don't actually remember, to be honest, these specifics. But the DLC itself was fine, and they started branching more into the fact that you could start recruiting other people to fight with you. And so Brotherhood comes around, and so I don't actually remember the exact inner workings of how the story played out, because you do have the Pope, the Borgia Pope, who's using a piece of Eden to control everyone. And then at the end of Assassin's Creed 2, you basically confront him, beat him up, and the classic conspiracy, you go into the vault of the Vatican and you find the trace of an ancient alien civilization, and the fact they're actually keeping the seeds of the universe and the origins of the human race under lock and key this whole time, and the vault of the Vatican has this thing. Something I really like that I've talked about previously is Assassin's Creed 2 actually is one of my favorite meta moments in games, where you talk to this deity essentially, and she basically talks to the screen saying, oh, this is a message not for you, Ezio, but for the one listening. And I thought that was a really cool little thing that they did there. But anyway, Brotherhood kind of continues that story. Now you have, I guess, because you can't actually assassinate Cesare Borgia, because I guess it's historically inaccurate. I guess that didn't really happen. You do have to deal with his, Rodrigo Borgia. You have to deal with his son, Cesare Borgia. And so Cesare is kind of this, womanizer, Machiavellian. Well, literally Machiavelli is in this game, in this universe. And he's kind of this, troublemaker and, bad boy and a sadist, essentially. And so I'll be honest, I remember the game opens up where like your villa is being assaulted by an ongoing army, by the Swiss or the French or the Italians, I forget. And you actually get to use a cannon and blow them up, and that cannon comes back in Black Flag, and that's kind of cool. But this whole thing is just, it's just kind of escalated and blown out of proportion. And what happens is you end up having to basically, defend your villa and then flee and then rebuild. And then you start a Brotherhood of Assassins and you take on Cesare. And you basically defeat him at the end of that game. But it was kind of like one of these games that could have been DLC, but got turned into a full like sub game or side game. And it kind of just goes with Assassin's Creed 2. I honestly, even when I was playing the game, I could not tell you the difference between the two. They have, except for the fact that Brotherhood has again, like I mentioned, the assassin mechanic, where you now have a group and a team, and you manage their, their outfit, their loadout rather. You send them on missions, which are just, don't look like anything, but you send them around the world, to different things, different little nods of the growing assassin order, and so. The actual lore in the Assassins universe is that the Order was destroyed, and Ezio is the first one to actually rebuild the Order in Europe in a very long time. And then after that, we have Assassin's Creed Revelations, which I remember everyone was insanely hyped for, because the trailer for Revelations is one of the best trailers I've ever seen for a video game. It's definitely in my top 10. At least my top 20. And what it is, first of all, again, kudos to Ubisoft Montreal for using really interesting music in their experiences and their trailers. They started out with Moby, and they moved on to Woodkid and Iron. And it's just this amazing, it feels like the song was made for, this game or that trailer. because it's so iconic. It has these big, powerful trumpets, and it shows like an old, weathered Ezio, and it's far in the future, and essentially he's come back to Masyaf, and so it's kind of like Assassin's Creed has been around to the point where, you know, they are going back to the beginning of the series and like a little pilgrimage or homage. And this little, you know, section is of the game. It shows, you know, the old, you know, Castle of Masyaf, and everyone's kind of fanboying over it. But what I love about the imagery is that not only is Ezio old and a little bit, you know, weathered and not as strong as he used to be, but the entire setting for the castle is in winter, and so everything is covered in snow, and it's kind of like showing this is the end of the series for this character before they move on to something big, which will be Assassin's Creed 3, which will be, of course, very big indeed. And so in Revelations, it's interesting. Ezio essentially comes back to the founding of the Brotherhood. I remember one of the fun, stupid things you actually unlock in this game is how exactly does this work? Yeah, it was this crazy flashback where you go to old Altair in Assassin's Creed 2, and Altair develops like the first like remote or hidden handgun. So actually, you have a flintlock hidden gun that you actually get in Assassin's Creed 2, which is just, again, like they already gave us 2 double blades, but they're just going crazy now with all the cool stuff they can give us. And it's such a well-rounded game because of that, because they're really pushing everything in the first game more. And so the same thing, this just shows Ezio, you know, he's an old man and he goes back to the Masyaf castle to revive and find, you know, the origins of the Assassin Order. And of course, the remains of the Templar are there to stop him. What's interesting, very interesting, is the setting is the late Byzantine Empire. Essentially, this is right after the conquest by Mehmet II. And so, you know, the main area you are in is actually Turkey, essentially. Well, modern day Turkey, be Constantinople. The other new mechanic you also get is a hook blade. And basically, this blade allows you to basically glide down metal strands with ease as you just kind of hang on to it, and it acts like a zip line. So there's definitely different mechanics here. You know, again, you have your team of assassins, you have your your hidden gun. One thing that I thought was interesting, you now have a blood bomb. You take lamb's blood and you throw it on the ground, and it goes everywhere. And this makes all the guards freak out and run away. What I have to say that's very cool is that, again, like the Byzantines are very rarely seen or depicted culture, and just the depiction of the dress and garb and the Janissaries is very, very interesting. I would have to say, though, on the whole, while Assassin's Creed Brotherhood feels like DLC and an almost integral part of this game, or like almost the same kind of game, Revelations feels like a wet puddle. It feels like, again, I've never been so let down by a trailer. Like the trailer was like this coming home, this like return, whatever. And you basically have like the opening cutscene where you have chariots, fighting each other in this area, and then you spend the rest of it in Byzantium, and it's just like, okay, I guess that happened. I honestly don't remember anything about Revelations. It just felt like more of the same and an excuse to go into this time period. What I really, really, really hated about that whole thing is, again, there's supposed to be this whole spiritual thing. Like, even in the trailer, it shows like Altair's ghost, and that's just not a thing that really happens significantly in Revelations. There's no like connection between these two characters that you think, oh right, because Altair is technically Ezio's great grandfather or something, and that's just never really addressed. It's just like, hey, here's a bunch of side quests and here's a bunch of characters, and this is where it just became really like a very whatever game where people did not care whatsoever about the overarching story. Just like, hey, this is a cool setting, let's just do stuff here, and that was it. So yeah, kind of disappointing. And what really pissed me off about Revelations the most, besides it being like a kind of shallowly disguised DLC pack, is that the big running thing in the game is that you find this like mystic hidden like wall or lock or something where you can't get past it, and you basically need to get these keys to open it. And so it's this big puzzle they're like hyping up by the end of the game, and when you get to it at the end of the game, it is the easiest puzzle to do. Like, it is a brain dead easy puzzle that to the extent that it is almost laughable and a joke. I just thought to me it was just so absolutely pathetic that and it had no real bearing and significance. I think like when he opened it, it was just the tomb of Altair, and it was a skeleton in a chair, and he found the original like hidden blade and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool, great, big clap, like fan moment, like great. But there was no significance to the scene. It wasn't like he got some big insight, or he's like, okay, this is what I have to do now. And now that I think about it, another offshoot of this, again, because that's such a big character, are the Assassin's Creed Chronicles games, which are a 2D based take on the series, which honestly, when I heard back in the day, I thought it sounded like absolute hot trash and garbage, but they're actually very fun. But that's kind of also a different series I might talk about later. But even in Chronicles, the first one they did was China during the same time as Ezio. And there's even this, I think, like a short animated story or movie or something where the Chinese girl protagonist actually travels to Italy to meet Ezio and to learn about the Assassin's Order. And so she actually knows Ezio even when he's super old and basically retired in Italy. And this is kind of all after or before Revelation. Not sure. He's very old, which I find is funny. There's a funny similarity between Ezio and Sam Fisher. They're both old, disgruntled men who are ex-super agents who now still kind of have it, but are just barely hanging on. But yeah, I think that it pretty much sums up Assassin's Creed 2 and just the massive cultural impact it's had. It's funny that not a lot of people, I think, have tried to like copy this game, except Ubisoft themselves. But yeah, it's a great game, and I love the atmosphere, the setting. The gameplay is a lot better. You can also jump usually to what you need instead of then falling into the ocean hopelessly. But yeah, the whole game is very well made and a great story and a great installment of the franchise. Probably the peak, I would say. So to that end, I'll end it there, and I'll leave one of the greater games of the 7th gen where it is. All right, see you guys.